It's the red light that does it. It's the red light that does it. Greetings and salutations, citizens of YouTube. This week, I'm going to have a conversation with my cinematographer, Sam, about sensor sizes. Ooh, exciting. But no, actually, I lose an argument to Sam because he knows what the hell he's talking about. We've come to the point in our time now where we don't have to worry about lifting the most expensive camera to get the best shots. A lot of times, the stuff that's available right now is incredibly adequate. That's another way of saying it's really good. And we would like to have an argument in front of you about how this stuff all... Yeah.
Do you want to make a joke about we're going to make an argument of does size matter? Do we want to go there?
We're going to anyway, aren't we? Yeah. So we actually have a size argument. No, you can't use that. We actually have an argument about whether size matters. And... as like life, I lose this argument. So we're going to go into this a little deeper. Damn it! That's the wrong thing to say.
Phrasing.
Stay tuned.
Phrasing.
Stay tuned. We're going to talk about cameras. Look, everybody. Sam.
Hey.
Hey, so we were having a conversation this morning about the best camera in the world, which is what we always do. We're always talking about cameras. And Sam has brought up the fact that he's had a lot of conversations recently about people wanting to fly their full-size SLRs on drones. And where this was an argument where a year or two ago, Sam would have been all about the biggest, most complicated camera on the planet, he has since become a convert, and I have since become the other side of the argument. So we are going to have a rational debate where he is going to kick my ass with facts, and I think he actually has a very valid point. So what is the argument that you have been hearing, and what have you been presenting?
So, I mean, I get a lot of people who are, just getting into drones. And it seems like, when I present them with a larger drone, the first question they have, can it lift a DSLR?
Yeah, what's the biggest camera I can put up?
And usually they're wanting to lift their camera, which is all well and good. I mean, the cameras that they're using these days for weddings, for photojournalism, for all these things, they're very well suited for ground photography. Right. They're fast. They autofocus really fast. They're very ergonomic so that while you're holding the camera, keyword holding the camera, they work really well. So why wouldn't you want to put it up in the air? But realistically, this day and age, that may not be the best idea.
Right. You don't need it either. I mean,
no, not at all.
You have people like, so what do you want to lift? So I want to lift my $40,000 Leica. My Leica body, my hand-built lens, I want to put this amazing camera up in the air, and we're just like, slow your roll, Holmes. You probably don't need to. This is a full-frame Nikon D700 SLR. It would be a really good candidate a couple years ago to fly on a drone, with the exception of a couple major problems. I can't trigger this camera remotely. I cannot do a lot of the functions I need to be able to operate the camera with while I'm in the air. And it is what is a D700? It's a 16 megapixel camera?
D700 is a 12 megapixel camera. Can I say that?
Yeah, sure.
So, right off the bat, and this is why the question of can I lift my DSLR? The question itself is fundamentally flawed, because DSLRs are terrible aerial platforms. The reason being, the whole DSLR concept is based on the fact that you've got a mirror box in the middle of this camera.
Yeah, the entire top half of the camera is actually lensing and prisms to mount light.
Right, yeah. So you've got a mirror here, that's the reflex part, going up into a big heavy glass prism in the top of the camera. And it's the best way to view through a lens. Optically,
it's one-to-one.
It's great. But the thing is, it almost doubles the weight. You've got the mirrorless cameras. This is still full frame, nice full frame sensor, and in fact it's higher resolution than that one. This is the A7R first generation, and It doesn't have any of the optical viewfinder system, but what it does have is the sensor, which is all you really need up in the air. And it's got all the quality of it. And even if I put a battery grip on this thing, it still weighs less than the D700 by itself. So, I mean, so first off, get rid of the mirror box. Get rid of the DSLR concept. You want a mirrorless camera. You want to strip down everything that is unnecessary about the camera to fly it. Because every little bit of weight is going to add size to your drone. Okay, so minor continuity error. I had to go out to the car for
Welcome to YouTube, y'all.
Yay! This is the size of a drone that you need to lift a camera that on par with a cell phone, you know. 1/2-inch size sensor.
Less than that.
Just over okay. Actually. 1/2.3. There's really no easy way to say 1/2.3 yards of a inch.
3 yards. It's a 3 yards of an inch.
You know,
it's a weird ratio.
third.
I'd like to actually tear one. Actually, yeah, okay. I'm listening, but keep.
Okay. So in any case, to lift.
Hold on. I have something I need to grab.
Yeah, you're making a lot of noise.
You need to be quiet. Because I'm not being quiet. There's your camera sensor right there. That's off a Spark, but it's the same sensor.
Yeah. So for a drone that can lift a cell phone size camera, you need a drone at least this big. To lift a DSLR,
it's an exponential.
You see this monstrosity behind me? I mean, this is what you need to lift a DSLR.
You need 22 pounds of drone equipment, and it's about $12,000. And every single piece of equipment. When I go out the door with my Matrice, I have like 42 different things I need to charge up. Q photo, right here. Make it bigger.
Anyway.
And gone. Anyway, so there is a lot of prep that's required for lifting a larger camera. It isn't just, you don't just pull it out of the box, turn it on, and take off. You have a lot of equipment to carry. You've got a lot of batteries to charge. You're going to need someone to help you run 6 batteries at a time if you're using a Matrice, or big batteries if you're using something else. There's nothing simple or small or easy about it.
Or cheap, for that matter. I mean, the batteries alone, those are, $160 each. You need 6 of them.
It's a $700 set.
$700 per set of batteries, and you may need 4 or 5 sets to really effectively be a drone operator all day.
When you're lifting a camera that size, because you have to have it on a gimbal that weighs 6 pounds, because you can't you don't just duct tape it on. You have to have it on a gimbal that can control it, and there are limitations to that as well. You are probably going to get a 16 to 20 minute flight, tops. So you're not flying a lot.
So that's your first problem is your weight. Is, you know, the DSLR itself, you've got a bunch of unnecessary weight on the camera to begin with, but then on top of that, you know, the camera, you want the smallest, lightest camera you can get away with, because you're going to run into functionality issues. And on top of that,
define functionality issues.
Yeah, I kind of flubbed through that.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you can't control it.
Yeah.
You can trigger it, and that's it. You can't focus it. It has to be auto.
Well, that's if you're lucky enough that somebody's come up with a trigger for your camera.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
If you're shooting,
best part, the
Nikon,
Canon, it works.
Canon works. Okay.
Nikon does not. There is no way to externally trigger a large, full format. You can do it with the D50, the D7, the smaller stuff. The not like the 6300 stuff. I'm not up on the newer Nikons. They do have infrared triggers, and then you can get an infrared IR trigger that you put on a servo controller, and then you can actually trigger it. That's all you can do. Now, if you're Intelli-G, call us. We want to talk with you, because apparently there are devices. There's a device called Intelli-G that allows you to control through different interfaces the full camera controls of many different.
I don't think that one does Nikon yet.
Of course not. The Nikon's new. Yeah. I mean, they're a brand new manufacturer. There's been very little market saturation of their stuff. I mean, it makes sense that you wouldn't support Nikon.
It's entirely possible there's a obscure drone company out there that is currently making.
Well, the problem is the widget. You need a widget for everything.
Well, yeah, you need a widget, and there might be some obscure company out there that's making the one for Nikon. We just don't know about it, and apparently nobody nobody else does
And
either.
LANC was a chance. Like we thought maybe LANC was going to help us out with. It was a common protocol for control. Panasonic went to LANC. Sony uses some LANC in their cameras, and it was controlling. It was controlling zoom. It would control iris. It would control shutter. It would control like ISO maybe. It was like 4 or 5 things. I mean, you weren't changing white balance because you were doing. But then you get into what is truly what changed the market for us. And when the Inspire 1 came out, you finally had Inspire 1 and Phantom 3. When you finally had, we went from a GoPro you're strapping on, you're just triggering, to having full camera control. There were no external. This is an X5S, very similar in appearance to the X5, which is the GH4. The X5S is based on the GH5 sensor.
That is not a GH4.
Okay, this is the beating heart of a GH4. This is the beating heart of a GH5, which is the next generation. It's still Micro Four Thirds sensor. It uses common Micro Four Thirds lenses as long as you can get them to balance properly. However, there are no switches, buttons, dials, knobs, controls, any sort of external interface except for a autofocus manual focus switch on the lens itself, which can be removed. Every single function that you're controlling in this camera is controlled through software remotely in your hands. When that happened, we took a hit in resolution from going from an A6000, which was a 24 megapixel APS-C sensor, or Super 35 as some call it, going to a 12 megapixel. What sensor size was that? It was basically
16 megapixel. The original X5 was a 16 megapixel.
I'm talking X3. Because that's when we switched.
X3.
Yeah, we switched.
That was 12 megapixels.
Okay, so we switched over to the X3, and that was essentially a GoPro Hero 3 black sensor. Because there's a lot of one guy makes the sensor and then everyone uses it. So the GoPro was used as it was a GoPro Hero 4 black because it was the same sensor that was in the Phantom 3 Pro 4K. It was the same sensor that was used in the X3 and in the GoPro. It was the same sensor. Sony made it.
The X3 actually had a 1-inch sensor. It just was a really crappy 1-inch sensor.
This is what life with Sam is like. Just as long as this interchase right here. Fine. You're wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah, it's just like so easy to say.
But quality-wise, it was on par with like a GoPro Hero 3, Hero 4.
DJI doesn't make their own sensors. They buy it from Sony. In this case, they bought them from Panasonic. They came out with the X5, which was the sensor used in the GH4. Does that make you happy?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you. It's the sensor used in the GH4, and it became an incredible. It was no compromises. It was 16 megapixels.
It was a little compromise. To me. So I'm a bit of a quality whore.
I have a term for that. Measure baiter.
Yeah.
If only I had more megapixels, it would be perfect.
Yeah.
If only I had more ISO, and you can just fly, right? So here we are in reverse. I'm saying megapixels matter, and you need it for massive panoramas, and you're gonna counter that. But you need it for large production work, where if you're doing backplates for renderings, they give us a megapixel count or a pixel count. It needs to be a certain number of pixels wide. You're making myself nervous by sending this around. I can see you staring at that, so I'm gonna put this down. You
just have to fidget. You always have to fidget.
Yeah.
Always.
I do. So, shut up, Sam. So basically, we went from having good quality sensors to having full control over our camera, and we were actually able to do more. It was a real come to Jesus moment for me, especially. I called you up after I used the Inspire 1 for the first time at the Worldwide, and I said, we have some questions we have to answer. Are we going to be concentrating on the equipment or concentrating on our art?
Yeah, and that was actually kind of the point at which my whole approach to aerial photography changed, because my drone at the time, Cerberus, which was a great drone.
There we go.
Which, I mean, it was a great drone at the time. I did a lot of really good work on it. I had for video, I was using a GoPro. And actually, a lot of the shots in my demo reel are from that drone.
Cerberus was actually built on this desk right here.
Yes, it was.
I'm very proud of that fact.
And I've actually got a time lapse of it building. We can put a link in the description below.
There we go. A little bit of it. Looking below in the comments.
Yeah.
I'm a pointer, so you got to use it now.
Yeah.
He hates me so much. He have 1,000 dying sons.
Okay, this is what life with Parker is like. In any case, so yeah, that was about the time I was flying with Cerberus. I was working on Raven. That was when I first started building Raven, and I was still having troubles getting a gimbal mounted because
That was hard.
You have to program it yourself. You have to get something that will actually physically fit, and then if it doesn't balance right, you have to figure out a way to make it balance.
Everything was compensation for something else.
Yeah, it was so hard to get it to work.
The way I put it is you had to get all of the different subsystems to fly in formation.
Right.
So you're working with power, you're working with control, you're working with radios, you're working with your gimbal. You're trying to control your camera. You're trying to control your radio links for your video downlink. You're trying to get all of those subsystems to fly in formation and then operate interchangeably, communicate with each other in such a way where you're actually going to get production video off or stills off while you're flying.
Yeah,
and all that at once.
Right. And even Cerberus, where I even had a system where I could essentially swap out an entire gimbal system for a hard mount, had everything with, little 3.5 millimeter jacks to change out the audio video signal. Like, this was something that I felt like, damn, I can change this really fast.
But you still had an Alex Mouse on it, right? You still had an Alex Mouse controller?
No, that was with the with Cerberus. So that was a DJI GoPro gimbal. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The H3 3D.
Yeah. So it had, that was pretty much, it took care of itself.
I
just needed to get the video signal to that in a way that I could quickly disconnect, take the entire gimbal off, replace it with Sony NX7.
I remember that. That was the Alex Mouse.
Yeah. That was hard mounted.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Just on a plate.
Yeah, it was just on a plate with a little
point and pray.
The kind of ball head you would use on top of your camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just basically just like hard mounted point and pray.
Yeah, but I could mount it wherever I needed to, and if I needed to change it a little bit, I just needed to tilt the drone. And I got pretty damn good at it. Yeah, I'd come forward, click, come back, click, come back.
Yeah.
But I mean, it worked, and I got some stunning imagery from that drone. But while I was working on Raven and hearing all these great things about the Inspire 1. That was when Cerberus ceased to be Cerberus due to an unfortunate incident involving a soccer goalpost.
What we call CFIT, or controlled flight into terrain.
Controlled flight into soccer goalpost. But yeah, I do have photos. I'll put one in here.
This was the incident that caused me to replace my drone with an Inspire. Because the power shut off in flight. Something was wrong in one of the dozens of things that I had to create. And my math isn't as good as the engineers at DJI. And I had a bad connection somewhere, and the thing shut off in flight and plummeted 200 feet into a parking lot and then was promptly run over by a forklift. Really, God? Really? But it was like 3 days before I had to go to the Worldwide. And Jason Bills, a friend of mine, let me borrow his Inspire 1, which was foolish in hindsight, but a wonderful thing for a good friend to do. And I loved it so much when I was done. I had a chip on my shoulder the size of the Inspire when I got to the workshop. And I tried for a week to knock it off in California. And when I got back, I just ended up writing a check to Jason. I said, "You're not getting your drone back. I have to keep this thing. It's perfect." There's really, I took a hit in the quality of the camera, but that's when I called you, and we had like a 2-hour conversation. We have got to stop measure baiting about camera sensor size because we are not getting our jobs done because we're spending so much time trying to get this thing to work that we're not actually doing what we want to do, which is go out and fly and show people perspectives.
Well, and on top of that, when you're out on, especially on creative work, where you're working for a photographer or a videographer who's hired you to get their creative vision from the air, you can't be dicking around with a system that doesn't always work. Even for Cerberus, that I had everything streamlined, so there was a preset way that I could just swap things out. It was still something. It took me 20 minutes to switch from video to stills.
It would take an hour
if
we changed a lens on our gimbal. It would take an hour to rebalance it.
Yeah. And on top of that, I had to bring this large toolkit with me where, if something went wrong, let me rephrase. When something went wrong.
When one of the 1,000 systems, when one of the witches in the coven decided to sing a little bit out of tune, suddenly you have to have an exorcism, and you have to find the demon and excise it from the, it was a nightmare. And it was also what it took to be a drone pilot. That was when the phrase, "So kids, want to be a drone pilot?" That's when that was born, because it was not an easy job.
Right. And I mean, I remember countless jobs with Cerberus where I was, trying to get it working as quickly as possible. We were losing light, and I've got, the photographer breathing down my neck. Hey, Sam, get it into the air. Get it into the air. We're about to miss the shot, and I'm trying to get this system working. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I've already spent the money on the parts for Raven, but it's just not working as well as I wanted it to. I still don't have that thing fully.
Right, I've got
gimbaled out.
This box here actually is my X8 that is a wonderfully capable lifter on paper. It's just probably never going to be assembled because I just don't need to lift I don't need to lift what my Matrice can do without any drama. Right. I would still be mounting my big gimbal on it anyway, and I can already do that with my Matrice without any drama. The batteries for it are $200 a piece and are too big to airship. There's so many reasons why this thing was disassembled and put in a box, and I bought a Matrice. So, and it's not just DJI. I mean, there's FreeFly, there's the BFD Systems stuff. There's some really good heavy lift out there that's amazing technology. But you really have to ask yourself, do I need to lift? And it comes back to the crux of our argument. Do you need to lift a big camera for the megapixels when you can do the same thing with the GH5 equivalent sensor? See, now you got me saying it, damn you.
The ability to have a drone that can just work, something where you don't have to dick around with repairing things each and every time, calibrating things each and every time, where you can just take it out of the box, put the camera on it, put the propellers on it, and fly it. That is invaluable in a real production environment, to the point that me, who up until that point refused to use anything less than 24 megapixels, had a whole host of lenses that were all pro grade, and even me, I was willing to drop down to a 12 megapixel 1-inch sensor on an X3 that every time I looked at that footage, I cringed just a little bit.
You can just see the wobble. You can see the wobble a little bit.
Just a little bit. But, the ability to just fly and not worry about it, and to be able to set up, launch quickly, there are shots that there's no way I would have gotten them if I hadn't switched the Inspire series.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't fly through a door with an X8. So
or being able to switch from photos to video and video to photos in air.
Yeah. Oh,
that was something. It took me 20 minutes.
My A6000 had a really nasty habit. Every now and then you'd trigger it and it would go into a menu, and you'd have to land to take it out of the menu. Meanwhile, you're speaking in tongues the entire time.
Right.
When I will tell you, though, and the old school guys who have been on this journey as long as I have, or even as slightly as long as I have, I meet them all the time, is we all know it was a little bit of a blow to the ego. And the reason we were on that set is we were the nerd kings that could create this system that could do what we needed to do. And then somebody's rich dad gave their kid a credit card, and he swiped it, and now suddenly he's a drone pilot.
Right.
Which is another conversation, but it is basically coming back to, if you don't know your craft, if you don't know your art, if you don't know why you're flying, all the gear in the world isn't going to solve your problem. However, it makes it a lot easier to get done what we had to really work hard to do.
Absolutely.
So now, with an Inspire, I was flying through doorways on the third day I owned the drone, and we'll show you the footage, we'll show you the shot of that. But
and a doorway, you're looking at something that's maybe 3 feet wide. If your drone is 3.5 feet wide,
right,
you're not fitting through that doorway. There is no threading that needle.
Right, but there is still a point where, as a professional pilot with a professional piece of equipment, I flew a 6.5 foot wide drone through an 8 foot hole, 5 stories above the ground in Brooklyn. And
you're also crazy.
I'm experienced. Where someone who just goes, oh, I don't know what'll happen because I've never flown a drone that doesn't have GPS. I've never flown a drone that doesn't have a compass that's talking to it, or all those other sensors. When those go offline, you switch to ADDI. I'm back in old school mode. I know exactly how this works. The first stuff I ever shot with was a KK2 board that didn't even have a... fuck it. It was a KK2 board that was just an analog gyro. That's all it was. It didn't even have an accelerometer. So if it hovered, it kept itself level. That's it. Everything else was pilot, and it looked like hot garbage in hindsight. But compared to what we were able to do at the time, it was a miracle. Now the Zenmuse stuff just works. The gimbal on the Autel is really good. The camera on the Autel is a Sony sensor, that the X-Star Premium that the Autel makes. It's a $600 drone. It's a good competitor for the Phantom 3. They're coming out with a new Mavic equivalent called an Evo that they're looking at. We're hoping to get one from them. I'm trying to find one. They're not even out in the wild yet. I'd like to see how it stacks up to the most popular drone that DJI makes. I'm all about finding competitors. I mean, it would be great. The problem is now that you don't just create a drone in your basement. DJI's got 3,600 engineers or something. None of them work in my basement. They're all quite smart at their own little thing. It takes a lot to get to the point when you start making cell phones to be at the Apple level. So if you're going to make a drone, you're going to end up with a GoPro Karma or the 3DR Solo or all these
drones that just spontaneously fall out of the sky.
Spontaneously are there.
That's a bad quality in a drone.
It's a bad trait. Reliability is kind of important when you're lifting what you own. So, but what's really important is that you have a company that has got 10 years of experience, they're iterating it over a period of time. It's really hard to go from 0 to 10 years of experience in one day. You're going to come out with some stuff like the Karma, which is going to have reliability issues. And even if you fix them, you're going to have such a hit to your reputation, you're not going to sell enough that you're going to end up going out of business with them. You're going to stop making them like GoPro did. There's a whole list of drone manufacturers that tried to come out with the new drone. And some of them are just really weird, and some of them are really cool, and none of them are as good as a drone that's had 10 years of iteration. So that's why I use DJI, because it works. Call me a fanboy, but I want my productions to go well. I need to have it work when I show up on a set. I pull the drone out and I calibrate it. I don't get a gyro health number 2 error when I'm using a Pixhawk board on it, where I can do everything. I've got 1,000 parameters I can adjust, and I don't want to on a set. I want to go that way smoothly, and I want to stop when I tell it to, and I want it to not wander around, and I want it to work. And if I'm on it, and we're talking about drones now, but it is an integrated system now. So if you're taking an external camera and you're integrating into the system, once again, Intelli-G, call us. We want to know how this stuff can work, because if I can incorporate bigger cameras, you may be having another argument with me about, well, why can't we put your FS5 with full control on a drone and do cinema with full control? Because there is a set of setting and praying and taking off, and then the cloud moves over and everything's off.
Of course, and actually that makes for a good segue, because
now everyone knows it's a segue. Thanks, Sam. Good job. Set it up. All you gotta do is swing at it.
You know what? No.
Moving on.
Not even gonna dignify that.
No fish on?
No.
Yeah, moving
on. So I mean, we talked about how when we initially went to the Inspire 1 from what we were both using.
The day the build community died. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a compromise. These days, it's not so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a reason for the fact that it's not a compromise anymore. You know, the sensors have gotten better. DJI actually makes
They're
good
the same
cameras
sensors
now.
They're the same sensors.
Yeah. Well,
the Phantom 4 Pro is a Sony RX100 sensor.
Right, but you talk to the person that's wanting to put their 5D Mark IV on there, they're like, well, 5D Mark IV is better than a Sony RX series camera. Well, yeah, on the ground. On the ground, it's absolutely better. But there's. So
I'll give you the arguments. I need. Well, what were the ones that we mentioned earlier? Pause. We'll come back quickly. Don't edit this out. And. So, depth of field. Why is it not important when it comes to aerial?
So yeah, depth of field. It's determined by a few different things. Sensor size is of course one of them. The focal length is another big one. Yeah. So the thing that people don't realize with depth of field is one of the big things that plays into it is the lens to subject distance. How far the lens is away from your subject. That's why in macro photography, you just see this little sliver of things in focus, and you have to use crazy small apertures to get any amount of depth of field because you're so close to your subject. Well, the reverse is true too.
We're not shooting food, we're shooting buildings.
Yeah, we're shooting buildings. Once you get 50, 100, 200 feet away from your subject,
everything's in focus.
Everything's in focus.
And you're just using your aperture.
You still use your focus to a certain extent to make sure that it's as sharp as it can be. But when you combine a wide angle with a long lens to subject distance,
Everything's in focus.
everything's in focus.
From like 10
You're not
feet
getting
out.
a shallow depth of field. And even when we use a longer lens, like the 45 millimeter for the X5S.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to focus because then at that point, focus is more critical.
We are getting a little more compression, yeah.
You are getting a little more compression. The depth of field does shrink a tiny bit.
Yeah.
To the point where you can have a background that is visibly out of focus.
Yeah.
But even then, it's only by just a hair. Even at wider apertures. Granted, it is a smaller sensor, but
I
I
have a clip that we can use. It's from a propane transfer facility. We shot a truck that was transferring around a driveway that was about 100 feet away. Came in and you can see just a little bit of bokeh. Just a little bit of, I don't know if bokeh is the right word. Bokeh is the shape of the focus, out of focus.
Character.
But yeah, just another way. But I want the increased dynamic range of a big sensor.
And dynamic range is a big deal in photography. The thing is, and this is another in the long list of things people don't realize about aerial photography, is that lighting matters even more for aerial than it does on the ground. Because on the ground, if the lighting sucks, you just throw up, a 12 by 12 silk,
right,
and everything's buttery smooth again, and you can get great lighting. In the air,
there's a lot of times on a set where they will bring us in they'll have us start an hour before sunrise, be ready. And then the sun starts to make us light. We're shooting that first hour of golden light, and then they put us aside for the day, and then they shape it with screens and lighting, and at the end of the day, when they can't control God's searchlight anymore, they bring us out for the last, the golden hour and the blue hour and the sunset, and then we go back to work because that's our hour, that's our time.
Right. And that's when you're going to get the best imagery anyway, and the lighting ratio is much less severe. So that dynamic range is not as important with aerial photography. Caveat, if you're doing it right.
For videography.
For videography.
For photography, I use bracketing.
Yep.
I take 5-shot brackets, and then I stitch it together with HDR Pro in Photoshop. And there's a lot of Photoshop. There's a lot of merging programs you can use that aren't Photoshop. But basically, you're taking shadows and highlights, exposing both of those properly, and then you're putting them all into one non-gaudy, non-garish, non-gauzy. I use ghost correction, so there's no blurring.
Right.
And then it just picks the values and it applies them to the image, and it makes it look much more natural to my eye.
Right.
I do that a lot.
And I mean, today's sensors are getting better and better and better, and they're only going to continue to get better. So unless right now, right this very minute, you are needing aerial photography of an ultra high contrast situation with high speed action that needs to be captured in a single frame, you really don't need high dynamic range in a single shot. You don't. You really don't.
Yeah. One of the things that I wish that I could do better is shoot lower light, because I have a night waiver. And it's not an impossible thing to get. If you have a license, you can file the paperwork and get a night waiver. Limits your height, and you have to fly it in controlled airspace. But I really wish I had better low light, and I really wish I had better. Me as a photographer, me. The stuff I shoot is always night photography from the military. I would never be happy until I could see in the dark with full color. I mean, that's just the way my brain works. I always want more ISO. But most operators don't.
Yeah, so you were already hitting on the fact that to fly at night, you need a night waiver. That's not something just anybody can get. It's not impossible.
Right.
It's not easy, though. And your average hobbyist isn't going to be doing that. Your average real estate drone photographer is not going to be shooting at night. You're going to be shooting at dusk in areas with
You're not
good
shooting
light.
a movie in the dark. I've never shot a film after dark.
And with film, usually video is the least problematic with high ISOs because you don't need them. Your shutter speed is going to be slow to begin with. Usually the problem with video is actually attenuating the light in the middle of the day.
Right. You have too much light.
Right.
Filters are your friend.
And then you get over to photography. I mean, especially DJI's gimbals, but other companies too, they're so good now that you can reliably get 1 to 2 second exposures. Long exposures, as if you're on a tripod.
If you look at any Discovery Channel show that was shot 3 years ago, and you see that corner warp, that shit doesn't fly anymore. That's just not acceptable. That was Phantom 3 Phantom 2, GoPro gimbal type stuff, you can just tell when it was older stuff.
Yeah.
You'll see, oh, we'll break out the aerial helicopter, and they pull out a Phantom 1 or a Phantom 2, and they take off, and it just looks like hot garbage. And you just go,
Right.
oh, that's adorable. You guys really thought that was... I mean, we didn't know better, but now it's literally, there's no excuse for shaky shots now. There's just
Right.
no reason for it.
But I mean, even you might get a tiny bit of drift, but you take the shot 2 or 3 times,
Right.
you'll get a 1 second exposure.
Yeah.
Pretty much guaranteed, even with a Mavic Pro.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like having a tripod in the sky.
On a cell phone size sensor.
And even if you did have the high ISOs of your ground cameras, you would still want to shoot those longer exposures because you can get streaking taillights from cars. You can get glass smooth water in
Right.
the ocean.
Right.
I mean, there's some really cool effects that you can do with long exposures.
Okay, sharpness.
Sharpness.
That's a bullshit argument now.
It,
With a
for the
1-inch
most part,
sensor,
it
with a
is.
1-inch sensor, I don't.
I will say that in all but very few circumstances, that's a bullshit argument.
The only time I've ever had blur issues and sharpness issues is lens problems. I had a bad
Yeah.
lens, and I had a 12 mil that was bad, and I shot some night stuff where you're really pushing the aperture, and
Right.
that's when everything accentuates. If your lens is wrong, if there's something out of
Oh, yeah.
alignment, and you open up your aperture, that's when you're going to see it. You're going to see
Right.
dirt on your sensors when your aperture's tight, and you're going to see lens alignment issues when the aperture's wide. And I did. And then I had some blurriness on one whole side of the screen, and that was not my camera's fault. That was not the sensor's fault. That was the pilot's fault because he flew a bad lens.
Right. Or the photographer's fault if you've got a
Well, that
separate
seemed- I
person.
was the-
Well, yeah.
Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
clarifying that so
For
incredibly careful.
being doubly at fault of having bad
Obtuse.
imagery.
Obtuse is the word I would use.
But yeah, you bring up a good point. If you're shooting with a Phantom 4 Pro, Phantom 4 Advance, or better, and you're getting soft images, it's not the drone's fault. It's not the camera's
You're
fault.
pushing
It is
some-
your fault.
You're setting something wrong.
You're either closing down your aperture so far, you're getting diffraction, you're opening it so wide, you're getting spherical aberration.
You're moving when
or-
you're dragging your shutter.
Yeah,
you're doing all
I mean,
kinds of
you're
things.
doing something stupid with your drone. These drones these days, that 20 megapixels, that is serious
yeah.
resolution.
That's better than my A6000. Well, my A6000 was 24, but I had nowhere near the control. I
right.
had nowhere
When
near
you look
even,
at the actual size
It
of
was a
the
4-year-old camera. I didn't have the range of color. I didn't have the codecs. I didn't have the frame rate. I was a 1080 camera. I didn't have the 4K 60 frames per second I have now.
Right.
There's so many ways where this camera now is better exponentially in every measurable regard other than megapixels. It matters
And
when you're
even
shooting a billboard.
And even megapixels doesn't matter that much because when you're talking about
I'm
20
sorry,
versus
sorry,
24,
sorry.
you know what? Fuck you.
What did you just say? Did you just
I'm
say?
not repeating myself.
You just said that.
So
Cue
when
the
you're looking,
tape.
no.
And even megapixels doesn't matter that much because
So when
I
you're,
have been vindicated. Years of argument have been vindicated.
I said in most cases, not all.
We'll play the tape.
So 20 megapixels to 24 megapixels. The actual width of your image is going from 5.2K to 6K in video parlance. So the 5.2 thousand pixels wide,
Right.
or versus 6,000 pixels wide.
This is the difference
not
between Sam and
that
I.
much.
This is the difference between Sam and I. I use the stuff. He uses the stuff, and he knows why.
Which is why you hired me.
Which is why I hired you. Which is why you're my boy.
But yeah, so going from 20 megapixels to 24 megapixels, you're only looking at a width increase of about 20%. 25%. Yeah. That's not much.
Right.
So, when you're talking about comparing the X5S to, say, the Canon 6D,
Right.
that's a 24 megapixel
Or the
camera.
100 megapixel
Yeah.
Hasselblad.
Well, that's a little bit more of a difference, but
I know, but there's a reason
yeah.
for that camera. But then again, don't know anyone who uses it.
right, yeah, going up to something 80 to 100 megapixels, that is going to double the width, double the height.
That said, if you use an 100 megapixel Hasselblad on your specially equipped DJI drone, call me, come on the show and explain to us why it's important, because I don't get it. Educate me.
More pixels.
Damn it. That was my argument. We're done. We're done here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming. This is the argument. We're done. You
We're
win.
We're not.
Damn it.
So, we're actually at a really exciting time in drones right now because when you look at the technology and where it's heading, right? We're finally getting larger sensors in the drones where you're getting DSLR-sized, high-end, compact-sized sensors
With no
in the
compromises.
drones.
With better
no
frame rates.
compromises whatsoever. I can tell you right now, the Inspire 2 with the X5S gimbal shoots just as good video as the two cameras that we're using right now, which is an FS5, Sony FS5, and a Sony A7S.
It's because it's a GH5.
It's essentially a GH5. Because you.
Square one. I'm not the one cursing in this episode. You notice that? That's great.
Yeah, that's why I'm behind the camera.
Okay, so this isn't a 45-minute video.
I know. But I did want to make a quick point.
No such thing with you.
True. But you look at what's being developed right now. You've got the X7. You've got the X7 camera that is brand new from DJI.
Yes,
that's compatible.
It's the APS-C sensor size.
Right. Which at that point you are legit straight in DSLR territory. Your 7Ds, your Nikon D500s. It is the same type of sensor as what's in those cameras. Right. But what's really interesting, you look at the lenses that was made for it. The widest one is marked Super 35 and has features that the other three lenses don't have, and the other lenses have features.
That's the 18 mil, right?
Yes. And it says Super 35. Super 35 is APS-C format in video terms.
Okay.
It's curiously missing from the other three.
Right.
And in the
when you look at the back of the 18 mil
yeah.
lens, it's a smaller aperture. It's a smaller edge. And then you look at the other big ones, it's a monster size. It's a full frame hole.
Yeah, and when you looked at the original press materials for those lenses, it actually said that it was designed for a full 35 millimeter frame.
Did they remove it?
I haven't seen it on the website recently. I actually looked for it. I have a feeling I know why.
Yeah.
I mean, it was there. It was there. I read it. And you look at the lenses, and it's still marked on the lenses which one is APS-C format, which ones aren't. We'll just say that, okay? One's APS-C format, the other ones are not marked as
What
such.
Sam is saying is that there's a bigger camera coming.
Yes. Full frame, those people who are stuck on full frame and want the 40-plus megapixel
Yeah, what did you say
sensor.
the megapixel was in the count? It was like 48, right?
Well, I mean, if you look at the way DJI has been building their drones and stuff, they're using a lot of the same sensor sizes and resolutions as Sony.
They're buying the sensors from Sony.
Yeah. So you look at their full frame camera, and you look at the fact that the lenses that are designed for that larger format all have leaf shutters. Leaf shutters are a hallmark of medium format usually. They're designed for the highest quality stills, which tells me it's a high resolution stills camera that may even be able to meet the growing surge of 8K video users out there.
That's a shut up and take my money category.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that would be a shut up and take my money category is if you put a 1-inch sensor on a Mavic.
That would be awesome.
Then suddenly it's like...
I've been wanting that since last year when the Mavic Pro came out.
Well, we always thought the Mavic's limitation was its sensor size.
Absolutely.
And now it's a matter of if you put a bigger camera on a smaller drone, why are you not going to want to carry that thing? Because let's admit it, the Phantom isn't huge.
Right.
But compared to a Mavic Air...
It's monstrous.
It's monstrous.
Yeah.
So, and if you can put one in your pocket and the other one has to go in your trunk, then you're going to carry one and you're not going to carry the other one.
Right.
So,
but
we digress.
The bottom line, once you get to about a 1-inch sensor, it's going to have all of the qualities that you are wanting out of your DSLR, because depth of field doesn't matter anymore. The sensor is large enough to get the most out of a lens. It's large enough to have reasonably good dynamic range and ISO sensitivity, and if it doesn't, there are ways of getting around that.
So what you're saying is stop, measure, banding, and fly.
Yeah, get a drone that works
for what you need a drone
for. What you need, yeah.
And if you're not a professional photographer, a Mavic is going to be pretty damn good for pretty much
absolutely.
everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, most people that are flying Mavics, they shoot most of their ground photos with cell phones. So why not use a cell phone quality camera for your drone?
Right.
Absolutely.
We're seeing some fantastic images off of Mavics.
Oh, yeah.
The camera you have when you need one is the best camera in the world, and if it's mounted on a drone, it's even better.
Definitely.
So, all right. So, thanks for joining us this week, guys. We are going to get this up relatively soon. As you can see, the lab is destroyed. We are still moving. We close next week now. It's been bumped a week, so now we are still packing. But, which will be, in Dateline terms, it'll be maybe ancient history really soon. So in other words, we're still moving in the shop, and it doesn't matter. Sam's also moving into his own apartment, so we are going to be doing shots sometimes at his place and sometimes at our new shop. So especially during the move, it's going to be a little weird, but we're really looking forward to bringing you guys along on the journey. And if you guys have any questions, or you want us to cover anything, if you want us to talk about anything in particular, any questions you have about drones or cameras or videography, or mostly aerial based, that's my forte. But I can drag Sam in front of the camera again. I don't mind. He certainly knows what he's talking about. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. See you guys soon.
It's sound equipment. It responds to vibrations.
Sorry, Mom.
Focus, Parker. Here.
Hey.
Here.
Work with me. Work with me. Try and keep up, Sam. Try and keep up. You go ahead. No, floor is yours, my
It's not
friend.
a question of keeping it up. It's going a straight line. I'm trying to get you to go in a straight line.
No. Go f yourself.
Oh God, the bloopers on this.
No. This is life. This is life.
This is life.
There's no bloopers this time. It's going to be real. Like, you're on the journey. Hang on.
Oh dear God. And you've got a totally closed off posture.
I've had this. Okay, he's going to play all the times I've already been sitting like this the entire interview. He's just overly sensitive. That's all. He's just overly sensitive. I'm listening.
I am self-regulating so that I have
I am
an open
actively
posture.
listening. It's either that or I do this.
Okay,
Welcome
yeah,
to.
don't do that.
Yeah. See. So.
Don't slouch. Sit up straight.
Lord, give me strength and patience.